Hello and welcome. This is rooflemonger, my friends. The Capcom Pro Tour Japan Regional Final finished up the other day, which means, well, the road to the Capcom Cup has officially begun. Capcom Cup sort of being the be-all, end-all tournament for Street Fighter itself. And plus, that $1 million prize at the end certainly helps. And here on the channel, we're just big fans of stats and numbers in general. It's interesting, I like it. It's fun to look at the numbers and see the patterns as they evolve. And with the Capcom Cup now having all 48 people qualified, well, there's certainly some things to look at. Thanks to @CatCami6, who always makes these lovely infographic breakdowns of just various, tournament results and all that over on Twitter. Please check them out. We can now see which characters of the 48 players that qualified, just exactly which characters did they qualify with. Now, before we go into greater detail with this, just in case you don't understand how the Capcom Cup works, so we're going to have 48 players in total, and 10 of those players qualify through offline premier events. So like things like EVO, Ultimate Fighting Arena, East Coast Throwdown, like some of the larger tournaments. If you win, boom, you get a spot. The other slots go to the World Warrior Series. These are more regional styled events with a much heavier online focus. And between the premieres and the World Warrior stuff, well, we have everyone now qualified. And the people qualified, well, you know a lot of these names. Why? Well, because they're some of the best players in the world. That's why. They didn't get here by luck, let's put it that way. Now, it is a very unforgiving circuit, I will say that. That's one of the biggest complaints usually in the modern version of the Capcom Pro Tour. First place is what kind of matters. You can get a lot of second places, you can place very high all you want, but if you don't win the big one, well then, tough luck. But you know what, on the flip, older Capcom Pro Tours rewarded the people who had the most money to travel. Back when it was point-based, if you could just simply attend more events, you could just get more points that way. So is there a happy medium? I don't know. That's not the purview of the video. The purview of the video is let's complain about Ken. You know how this is. Whoever's on top, we gotta claw him down. That is just the way the business works. And with 48 people now representing for the Capcom Pro Tour at the Capcom Cup, you can see here certain characters obviously are weighting a little bit heavier on this list. So how does this work exactly? Well, if you see that little pink icon by their name, it means this is the amount of times they were used as a secondary character instead of the primary. So Cammy, obviously, you can see here, used quite a bit as a secondary, but for a lot of characters, it's kind of a one-off deal. And hey, fair enough, a lot of fighting game players, they have the character, that's who they're going to stick with. And raw data like this can tell a lot of stories. Like the big one, hey, now that it's all said and done, everyone's qualified, right? Who's at the absolute top of this list, and handily so? Well, it is Ken Masters. Ken, figure of controversy over the lifespan of Street Fighter 6. Let's put it that way, right? These days, people decry him as the worst Shoto, when Ryu only, well, yeah. Now, I do appreciate that a lot of the usual Ken down players, they have the appropriate amount of shamelessness in defending this. There is absolutely an art to how you do this, and I appreciate a good artist, so big ups to Phenom. Now, of course, this doesn't happen in a vacuum, right? As of the course of the Capcom Pro Tour, we've had balance patches, and things have definitely changed up. Like, let's take two characters here with very high representation in terms of the numbers here, right? Ed and Bison. Both at the start of Season 2, incredibly strong characters, and Ed would go on to evolve over the course of the beginning of Season 2 as people kind of figured out how really busted he was, right? And both have been nerfed since, so they were definitely stronger at the beginning of the Capcom Pro Tour season versus now coming to the close of it. That said, however, some people oversold Ed specifically as having fallen off, and the final Japanese event, which crowned our last Capcom Pro Tour entrant, which is Fudo, was absolutely filled with Eds, including an Ed versus Ed grand final. Like, Ed got tweaked down a little bit, sure, but he is still a horrifically strong character. Just because you eat a nerf doesn't mean you're automatically bad, right? And just because you get buffs doesn't mean you're automatically good, where this kind of brings in the next part of our numerical data. There's always the argument to be made that you can look at such a list almost like a tier list, right? And I don't necessarily fully agree with that, because obviously, well, the characters are a big part of it, the players are kind of a bigger part of it in the end, obviously, right? As it's the players who are the people who are qualifying, winning the matches, winning the tournaments. And even if a character is world class, it doesn't necessarily mean a world class player likes using that character or it's a good fit for them. Like, given the heavily competitive nature of the game, when you look at this list as an overall, honestly, that's not bad. Like, yes, obviously hell of Kens, hell of Cammy, sure, right? But there's a lot of overall character representation. So I can't really necessarily fully look at this as like a way to say this character's top tier and this character's not top tier, right? Like, is Ken definitively a better character than Rashid? I don't know, Rashid's kind of messed up. Just because more people qualify with Ken than Rashid doesn't mean Ken is better than Rashid. But the one thing you can look at is the people who don't make it. The people who are not chosen by the good players playing for money. So don't think about all the ads, all the Cammies, all the Kens. Look at who is not making it. And then that part, I can kind of say that is a little valuable as a tier list. When you get to the wretched, forgotten, misfit characters. 48 players, and not a single one of them qualified using any of these characters. Why? Because if you're playing seriously and competitively, these are probably not characters you want to pick to win. Now, in the case of Marissa specifically, Marissa did have some, not a lot, but some representation at last year's Capcom Cup, being used by Big Bird, and these days, well, Big Bird does not believe in the character. Marissa got a lot of buffs in Season 2 and then in later patches as well, but also ate some very, very large nerfs. And competitively, those nerfs were some of the best things about the character, like her level 3 checkmate scenario. Some of her Oki in certain grab situations, right? And that kind of all went away. Yes, lots of other buffs, sure, but lost some of the bigger hitters. And now, there's no Marissa representation. And as for Jamie, Lily, and Honda, well, they've never even been. And the only reason there's even one Manon rep at all for the Capcom Pro Tour is because Idom is one of the most stubborn people alive. He's constantly sticking with the character, even though he should probably switch. But you know what? God bless him for it. I love the persistence. I love the fact he is making it work. And who's making it work for our misfit characters here now in Season 2, going into Capcom Cup 11? Well, nobody. Like, you look at these characters, and especially like Lily and Honda, and everyone knows, like, these are the worst characters in the game, basically. Sure, they get buffed in patches. Like, the Honda buffs have been significant. Like, did it ever still make up for the headbutt nerf? Hey, well, we'll find out, right? And the Lily the Lily buffs. Like, what buffs? They're the weirdest buffs in the world. They're technically buffs. They don't actually change anything, but sure. And Jamie just straight up suffers from, like, a systems issue. The drink mechanic holds him back. So once again, not necessarily a tier list or nothing, but it is very telling when you get the best players in the world together and they're playing their damnedest because they're playing for $1 million. The characters you see more often than not versus the characters that you don't see at all, right? Because when you're playing for $1 million, you're probably going to play the character you think is better in the end. And that certainly isn't Marissa, Jamie, Lily, or Honda right now. Obviously very subject to change, right? Today's balance is not tomorrow's balance. Season 3 is closer than you think, and cosmic scale, it's not that far away now, right? And come Season 3, maybe Honda's killing the game. We're going to see 20 Hondas qualify. That's my future. That's the future I want to see. That's when Street Fighter 6 finally becomes real Street Fighter. But in the end, I always just find numbers like this fascinating. I always love seeing where the competitive end of fighting games end up, which characters are more valuable, which characters are less valuable to the top players. There's always some stories to be told, and at bare minimum, yo, we know which characters are pretty bad, and yo, Ken down players, come on, get off it. That said, though, that is the video. So, thank you very much for watching. Hope this video has found you well, and go out and play some Street Fighter.